love people. Hey guys, MasakoX here. Now, probably one of the major staples of this very channel are the what-ifs that concern a character that does a complete 180 in terms of their outlook on life. You know, the characters that decide to turn over a new leaf and instead change their wicked ways to those being part of the Z Fighters and fighting for a sense of justice, or whatever Goku's feeling like at the time. Now, if you're thinking that all of these are really far-fetched, they're not as far-fetched as you might think. A good proportion of the Z Fighters used to be Goku's enemy, but decided that in order to make sure that they, could stay living, they decided to move sides and actually fight with Goku instead of fighting against him, because that might be the smartest thing to do. He does have a tendency to do that to people, make them see differently. So what might have happened had Cell been given that privilege? Well, what if Cell turned good? Okay, there's a little bit of a technicality to that one. In regards to the perfect Cell that we saw during the Cell games, the Cell that we know about, his conclusion is far forgone. His lust for conquest and destruction, fueled by Lord Frieza and King Cold, as well as the Saiyan insatiability for a good fight, meant that he was a bit of a lost cause and you couldn't really realistically turn him good. But you're forgetting about a particular Cell. What about the present day Cell? The one that's in Dr. Giro's sublab? Instead of just taking the blueprints for androids 17 and 18 and then just scarpering off leaving an explosion in their midst, they just decided to report back to Bulma and it just went from there. But Masako! Trunks and Krillin thought that this Cell would turn into the Cell they're already fighting! What would make this Cell different? You're just a Cell fanboy, Masako! Unsubscribe! Shirt now available on Teespring, by the way. So when you see me in person, you can tell this to my face. Yes, I am very much aware that this Cell, if left unattended, would have eventually turned into the Cell that we were very familiar with in its perfect form. It all stems from either Krillin or Trunks, or both of them, having a different thought process. Upon retrieving the blueprints and finding about this new Cell embryo, Bulma makes a decision, granted after hours and hours of soul searching, that this present day Cell hasn't done anything wrong. Yet. It's still very much in its developmental stage, and it could be reprogrammed given enough time. If Dr. Giro could theoretically do this on his own in a mountain sublab, then the Briefs family, with all of their know-how and resources, they could do this lickety-split. Besides, Bulma's thinking that this guy might be a useful ally in the future if it's done right. If they can just fiddle around with the DNA that's been already programmed, like take out the Frieza bits and up the good guy bits, then it could work. Remember, Cell is a biomechanical product. When Goku finds out about this plan, he's all for it because, oh wow, a new strong guy to fight? Oh, that's gonna be so awesome. But the rest of the guys, they're not so enthusiastic, really. But then the guys realize that they used to be enemies of Goku and, if it worked for them, it could work for this Cell if given the right circumstances, so they decide to just roll with it because, they got Vegeta, and you know what he's gonna do later on in the Cell arc. Since Krillin made the decision not to blow up the lab, Bulma and Dr. Briefs then relocate to Jiro's sublab and set up a shop there, as well as briefly stopping to patch up an injured 16. After assessing the Cell embryo inside its master tank, the pair worked tirelessly in order to try and translate Jiro's archaic programming code. This is all going on as the Cell games are progressing, and of course 16 sacrificing himself, Gohan going Super Saiyan 2. In the midst of all of that, Bulma and Dr. Briefs are doing their thing. Bulma and Dr. Briefs successfully managed to break down Cell's DNA. After hearing the anecdotal evidence from Piccolo that Cell's DNA is made up of all the different fighters, as well as Frieza and King Cold, they sure enough are able to locate the specific DNA, as well as the DNA that they don't recognize, that they attribute to the mutant Ice People. However, DNA engineering, even in the Dragon World and even for the Briefs family, takes a long time. This takes months to be able to decode. Based on Dr. Giro's research, they're going to have to take a crash course in bioengineering in order to make this work. But at the end of all this, because Bulma's a very tenacious person, they were able to successfully wipe out all the evil traits from Frieza and King Cold's DNA, leaving only the good stuff, the cordial attitude, the politeness. Even though we know the politeness was all sarcastic, Bulma could make it work. And at the same time, they're able to amp up the positivity and the good nature of the current Z Fighters. However, with all this technical jiggery-pokery, there is an unexpected side effect from all of this. In the original story, this embryonic Cell was left for 17 years to slowly gestate on its own in the background, as, this was a sublab, no one was supposed to know about this, so it could just tinker away using low power and just get it done. However, that was subject to the fact that there was no external stimulation whatsoever other than the main computer. With Bulma and Dr. Breeze fiddling around with it though, and all this extra stimulation, it's meant that this embryo is growing up faster. So instead of 17 years to fully gestate, it's gonna take more like 17 months. When Bulma calls the gang over to the lab, they are met with a larval formed cell, you know, the one that looks like a bug thing, and it's just like sitting there, just looking around, and yeah, naturally, it's very horrifying. And the Z Fighters are like, ugh, gross! Piccolo isn't really that thrilled either because he was the first person to witness Imperfect Cell's horrific visage. Speaking of Piccolo though, Bulma has a favour to ask of him. She would like him, as well as Gohan, to help the creature ultimately learn the difference between right and wrong. Kind of like nurture it, as it were. There is only so much that engineering can do. It has to learn from good example as well. Piccolo's rather confused as to why it has to be him to do all of this, but Bulma then explains that all of this time he learnt from Gohan indirectly about changing his ways and it worked out for him, so in theory if he could just pay it forward to this larval formed cell as it grows up, then it might work as well for that as well as it did for Piccolo. Gohan is quite enthusiastic to do this as well because it worked for Mr. Piccolo, so it could work for Mr. Cell? However, before they can actually progress, Vegeta brings up a very good point. What does it eat? There's one thing that Bulma couldn't actually program out of this creature. It still needs to drink, people. Bulma couldn't find a satisfactory human food source for it to actually have as an alternate energy supply. But then Krillin hits upon the idea, since, you know, he's carrying senzu beans all of the time. It's kind of what he does after the Cell arc. He suggests, well, why don't you just feed it a senzu bean? That might work. So he pulls out a bean and throws it to the larval creature. It actually likes it. The reason why I'm suggesting senzu beans is because we know that Cell can process it and use it to its full effects. You know, it works for Perfect Cell, so it should work for this cell. But this is great, Bulma's thinking. It doesn't have to rely on human plasma. Also, it saves her a hell of a lot of time in order to not have to fully synthesize human plasma. She's just thinking, whew, that's gonna save me weeks. The only thing they have to do now is convince Korin and Yajirobe to actually allow them to grow senzu beans down on the Earth instead of up at the lookout, or at his little tower. And so long as they can do that without the public finding out about senzu beans, you know, that'll be fine. And it's not because of any ethical reasons here. Nah kid, it's quite frankly, I'm not gonna get a share of the profits if I let you have them with the public. There's only one more thing to do now for Bulma to call this project a success. The name Cell. It doesn't seem quite right at this point. They decide to just keep up with the nomenclature that Dr. Gero had been using up until, you know, Android 19. Since technically Android 20 was Dr. Gero, then Bulma's thinking, Android 21? But boss, I know. Android 21 exists in FighterZ. Yes, I know. However, Bulma, at this point in the timeline, doesn't know about Android 21, so she's just thinking, hey, I just came up with a name, cool. As the years go by and the larvae grows, Trunks and Goten begin to befriend it and treat it like it's some kind of plaything and a pet. Chi-Chi and surprisingly Vegeta are not too happy with the kids playing with this thing. What if it actually goes against Bulma's programming and teachings and kills them or something? Bulma's not worried about it at all. If she trusts it enough to be able to play with Trunks as a toddler, then it should be fine. And besides, Bulma's just gonna say, are you saying that my programming's not good? Vegeta then just goes, I could easily destroy it anyway. Whatever. The years pass by and we're heading into the Buu saga. The larval state Cell has now successfully transformed itself into its imperfect form after years of maturity. Naturally, Goten and Trunks, as the little boys, think this super big bug man looks really cool. You know, it looks all gross and stuff. It looks like a bug man from a movie. That's so great. Oh, it's gonna be fun. Ah, yes, I'm a bug man buddy. 21, unlike the original Imperfect Cell, has had years of imprinting of good manners and morality, as well as having a childish personality for hanging around children all the time. So he's just a big bugman kid. He's also so much more innocent than the original, and this leads to many comedic moments in the Buu arc because you got this big bugman walking around with two children, they're having so much fun, and people are just going, oh my god, it's a bugman! I'm not a mean bugman, I just want to have hugs. But what about the androids, Masako? What about 17 and 18? What do they think of all of this? Well, naturally, they're absolutely livid, and can you blame them, really? They have a right to be upset because they were absorbed and, you know, they thought they died and this thing is there and it could do the same thing. Bulma gives the same spiel that she did for Vegeta and Chi-Chi, and the androids say that if that thing gets anywhere near them, they're going to destroy it. This leads to a very sad moment when 21, witnessing all of this and just wanting to be friends with his siblings, tries to befriend 17 and 18 while they're over at Kame House one time. Neither of them want anything to do with this new creature, and this makes this really childish Bugman really sad. It's just sitting on the beach looking out to the ocean feeling totally alone. Neither of his siblings want to really play with him or actually talk to him or even be in the same room. Naturally, he's going to feel very isolated and alone, but just then, little Marin walks up to 21 and is just looking at him. Not scared, just curious. Then she chuckles a little bit. That cheers up 21 a little. At least some people like him. But at the same time though, 21 is scared about what 18 would do if she saw him with her daughter. So he just flies away, leaving Marin just standing there looking rather confused. As all of this has been going on over the years, Piccolo has been honouring his promise to teach 21 the right ways to be a good person from what he knows, as well as the fact that Kami's inside of him. And of course, you've got to do some proper training as well, because this creature has some good power in there, so you might as well make him useful to be part of the Z Fighters in case something happens now that Goku's not around. And fortunately for both of them, it turns out they actually have a lot in common. They both enjoy meditation, they both enjoy silence, and they both love the company of children. With Gohan there, it just makes things really amicable. They all get along just fine. It's a sort of new father-son relationship, and it gives Piccolo something to distract himself by, now knowing that Gohan's growing up and slowly kind of wanting to have his own life. So 21 is like a very ideal replacement. As for Gohan, what does he think of all this, Cell thing? Especially since Cell kind of killed his father and he had to kill him himself? Well, at the same time, he's a rational person. He gets that this version of Cell is not the same Cell that he destroyed. He's gonna give this guy a chance. By the time we get to the 25th World Martial Arts Tournament, 21 has now become stronger than the version of Imperfect Cell that we first met. And of course, naturally hearing about this said tournament, 21 is itching to be able to actually fight in it because, there's a lot of Saiyan in him, so he wants to have a challenge. But at the same time though, he remembers that the way he looks could generate a mass panic, especially after all the comedic pranks that he, Goten and Trunks had actually been pulling. Then Piccolo hits upon an idea, something that he did with Gohan before the Cell games occurred. That's right, he's gonna give Cell a clothes beam! There we go, 21 is wearing Piccolo's gi sans the cape because, he's got wings. Now that he can actually take part, 21 is so excited, more excited than any time of his life, and he's gonna get to meet Goku. He's so excited to see him finally because Goku's part of him. And Goku's kind of excited to meet him because he's been witnessing the whole thing going on from the other world. And when the two actually meet, they're really happy to see each other. They give each other a hug because 21's really happy to see him. And this creates a bit of a comedic moment because people aren't too sure of is he trying to absorb Goku or something? It's like, what's going on? No, it's just a big bear hug. As that's going on, the tournament allocation is starting to ramp up. As all of the fighters are gathering around to find out what slot pairings they have, Mr. Satan then spots the Imperfect Cell and is absolutely horrified. Not only for the fact that this creature seemingly is back from the dead, but the fact that it's in the tournament and he could potentially fight it. He's still got a bit of a sore neck after Perfect Cell whooped him into a mountain during the Cell game all those years ago. It's one of his best excuses of getting out of any fights or challenges he doesn't want to. He's not the only one to be properly confused. Shin and Kibito are confused as to why this thing is even around. Didn't this try to destroy the Earth a few years ago? Why is it here? For the time being though, they carefully observe because they have another hunch, because they're there concerning Babidi and Majin Buu. They're going to keep a close eye on this Android 21 person. And I think we'll leave things here for now. So there we go. Had Baby Cell been given a chance to have a new lease of life and a second chance, things might have turned out quite nicely for him. It would have set in motion another strong Z fighter to join their ranks, as well as giving Piccolo a new father-son relationship for him to have, as well as Gohan, who is at the same time growing up. And I think that this new Android 21 could be very useful during the Buu arc. We're gonna have to wait and see for that one. So what did you guys think? Do you think this new Imperfect Cell has potential, or is there something else that we could do? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!